are back for an episode of the Embodied Love Lounge.
Mm-hmm.
And what are we going to be talking about today?
We're going to talk about the cervix,
orgasms,
and psychedelic states.
It sounds pretty interesting to me.
Super interesting. So let's jump in. What is the cervix? I should just, clarify that. A lot of people don't think it's a sexual organ. I think at most you hear about it for childbirth or when it hurts.
Exactly. Well, first of all, the cervix itself is not its own organ. It's a part of a larger organ, which is the uterus.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the cervix, if you were to look at it in Spanish, is called el cuello del útero, which means the neck of the uterus. I liked how you also described it
as the mouth.
The mouth of the uterus.
Yes.
Especially because we talk about suction sex a lot, in case you all haven't noticed. And we talk about the vagina as being a mouth, but also the cervix itself as being a mouth and having that ability to both suck and create stimulation.
Mm. So, okay. What does it feel like?
Well, that's kind of the next question is what is cervical?
How do you find it? A lot of, I've had women where they've gone home after an anatomy session and they get really scared. They think they have a big cancerous bulb inside and they run to their doctors.
Okay.
Because they don't know what they're feeling for. And when they make first contact, sometimes it feels weird. Sometimes they don't feel anything.
Well, what it will feel like to your finger, for instance, is something similar to the tip of your nose. And it can either be soft, or if you were to move out towards the side of the nostril, it can be even softer. Or if you were to go kind of towards the ridge of the nose, it can be harder.
Okay.
And that's not just different in each person, but it's different at different times of your life, different times of your month cycle, and different times of depending how much you're stimulating it.
Do you know that it changes colors when a woman's pregnant?
It also changes colors with arousal.
Yeah, but it'll actually go blue.
Okay.
So that's pretty cool.
Because there's a lot of blood that's being...
Yeah. So that's how, sometimes if a woman doesn't know she's pregnant and she goes for a pelvic exam, the doctor's like, I think you're pregnant. She's like, how do you know that? And it's the color change.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Wonder what kind of colors it flashes when you have a cervical orgasm, for instance.
I don't know. Neon bright.
Neon bright.
Okay. So then tell us a little bit about the fact that...
Well, we could get a little bit more in detail on how to actually...
In a moment, what I want to cover first is how we're told as women that there's not a lot of feeling there. And then even in some cases when an IUD is put in and there is pain, that pain gets denied by the physician. So just really curious, if you've heard that and your thoughts on that.
Yes, it is a very popular belief. And this is where ideology, education, all converge into sometimes overriding and even threatening the experience in a bad way of the person who is that actually has the cervix. Because most textbooks, and if you were to ask someone to tell you hey, show me some anatomy of the nervous system and how the cervix gets sensation or has any type of feeling, it would be an innervated part or a non-innervated part of the body, meaning that there is no nerve endings that go there.
Everything has a nerve ending. Otherwise, the body can't communicate with it.
Well,
so is it like a psychic communication? Hello, brain. Hello, cervix. It's a psychic connection. Yes, you need to behave now. I don't want to behave now.
Well, there are some parts of the body that have more innervation, other parts less.
Okay.
And so they might say, for instance, that it's just such few nerve endings that there really isn't any sensation there at all. The problem is, however, is that when people are getting, for instance, the IUD put in or taken out, excuse me, that they can go through tremendous amounts of pain. And as opposed to going, oh, this woman here is feeling pain, I'm going to be more gentle.
Yes.
They get told this part of the body isn't innervated, so whatever pain you're imagining is in your head. So you're just imagining it.
Doctors will often say a lot of that to women. It's in your head. Well, it's also in my body because I'm feeling it. Well, also the cervix will dilate. It'll dilate in orgasm, it'll dilate in the monthly cycle, and it dilates, of course, immensely with birth, just to try and open up enough so that a baby can emerge.
Absolutely. And it also dilates with stimulation during a sexual experience, yes.
Yeah, and I'd heard in Thailand some women are trained to open their cervix completely and pull in a penis. Which typically is not something that we hear of, or that a skill set that we actually really want to do, because it's best not to be penetrating, I think, that area.
Well, I will tell you a story in the explicit part, if you remind me, around the ability of cervixes to open, swallow, be like mouths. But I think for this part, though, we could talk about that the cervix, however, unlike a throat, is not just a hole to the stomach, that there's actual sphincters that operate.
Like an inner and outer chamber.
Yes. In fact, there are two sphincters. There's an internal sphincter and an external sphincter. So both the sphincter that is going to block anything entering into the uterus via the cervix through the vaginal canal, or as well the sphincter on the inside, which is the one that first gets signals to allow the baby to come out from internal pressure.
But also imagine menstrual blood.
Yes. Well, I'm not actually too familiar exactly with where the menstrual blood operates in terms of the two sphincters, but I mean the linings are going to
come through both.
Through the linings, so it would be as well something that would trigger the opening of that. However, I don't think it's as much as you get, obviously.
No, of course not.
But the big thing, though, is that I want people to understand, if they're stimulating with their finger or with any kind of phallus, be it mechanical toy or biological penis, that they do not need to have the fear, though, of penetrating through that internal
and having
sphincter.
Something get lost in the inner space somewhere.
Having something getting lost. I mean, like the biggest thing that you want is to make sure that, of course, everything is clean and sanitary. So that way, then you're not like having any type of negative bacteria, because there's bacteria everywhere. So it's not like you don't want to get bacteria in there. There's already bacteria there, but you don't want to have foreign bacteria that shouldn't be there to be placed there. But other than that, like it's.
And the cervix does act like a mouth in the sense of when there's ejaculation of semen into the female body, the cervix will literally drink it up and pull it into itself. So that's kind of an interesting function too. And I've been told that it sort of like does this pulsing in and out. So the cervical neck lengthens and then shortens. And so the whole uterus is actually...
Well, and this gets to the other part of why are we talking about the cervix? Why are we talking about cervical innervation? Why does any of this matter? Well, it's not just because we have people that are declaring that they have pain and discomfort there, either due to medical procedures or due to a sexual experience, and they're getting ignored. But the other side of it is that there is a tremendous amount of pleasure that can be unlocked here, a tremendous amount of release of tension, emotions. You speak about a lot of times we talked about it in another episode, you can all have a listen to, on orgasm and depth, about how some of these deeper orgasms bring a lot of emotions with them. And so then this connection of emotions, cervix, pleasure, and having kind of this even more complete expression that isn't just mechanical when you go into a sexual intimate experience. Like now all of a sudden the innervation of the body has a tremendous amount of importance, and that never gets spoken about.
Also, one thing that fascinated me when I was first speaking with you and interviewing you on a lot of the session work that you've done, you were explaining that you could relieve menstrual cramps, sometimes even in one session, that often the culprit of that would be the cervix that would kind of be locked in a particular place, and that the cervix actually needs to have mobility and flexibility. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the cervix, again, isn't this static bit of sort of hardness that is only there to open and close when menstruating or giving birth. It's also something that can give out tremendous amounts of pleasure. Now, the anatomical books will typically tell you that the cervix has the ability to kind of move a little bit with your menstrual cycle. It has the ability to pull up and away during sex, because then it doesn't get battered by the penis, which means that it can't really experience pleasure. It also forms a sperm receptacle, because the purpose of the cervix is solely for reproduction. And it does that to avoid, the penis. And what I had started to notice, that actually the cervix doesn't just pull up, it can come forwards and reach towards what it wants, which means that it can actually also get pleasure. It can dilate, meaning that it can open that the external ESO, and allows for that outer sphincter to begin to open and dilate the exocervix, the part on the outside. It then has the ability to suck. It has the ability to then swing and have range of motion. It also has the change of going from hard to plump, so it actually engorges itself and
so
swells.
There's engorgement capacities there.
There's lots of stuff that's going on there, and the more that it has the ability to do all of these things, then the more it kind of takes on a life of its own, meaning that it's moving a lot during a sexual experience.
But that would make sense if we understand the anatomy of the uterus, which is being held up by suspensory ligaments. Imagine that the uterus is like resting in a hammock, and that hammock, and you need to have mobility so that if there's jarring movements on the outside, the uterus is protected. So it's very mobile. And a lot of the problems that we have with that part of the body is when one or two or any of the attachment and ligaments get tight or stiff or locked or twisted.
Yep.
And those structures need to be released.
Just imagine if you had a trampoline where the springs on the right side were really tight and the springs on the left were extremely loose.
Yeah.
Everything's going to be bouncing in really weird ways. Or imagine if the netting was actually woven tighter and stiff and hard in one, like in the middle, versus and then being really soft on the exterior, or vice versa. You're gonna have very different effects on the bounce. And this is the thing that I think becomes really interesting, that when you go, okay, whether we have been able to understand and look at anatomy on such a small level to really get how these areas are innervated, or we want to call it something else, the fact is that people are having physical sensation when these areas are getting stimulated. And the more that we can bring mobility, blood flow, and awareness to these areas, those sensations start to amplify, and we can even begin to change them, which then brings us into this place, again, which is something I really love about your work, of possibility. And when we enter into possibility in our education, and we don't have authority figures that are kind of overruling what our bodies are telling ourselves, actual people's experiences, then we have the ability to actually go beyond what is kind of known as capable, which I think is this fact that you can actually have orgasmic pleasure from cervical stimulation and even enter into psychedelic states.
That's weird. Just saying. For the average person, that would sound really weird. I just want to bring something to the attention around something miraculous about the cervix that I didn't know about, but I've had a direct experience of this. And I had a LEAP surgery. This is a common procedure where if you have cell changes on the cervix, HPV being one of the main causes for that, they'll take a piece of the cervix and then they'll test it. So with the LEAP, unfortunately I got to see this on a huge screen TV, which were very disruptive and shocking. But the thing that was really interesting is they took a pretty big chunk of my cervix out. And
was it like with one of those little metal mouth looking machines?
No, it's a LEAP. LEAP is they run electrical current through a wire and they cut that way.
Like a lightsaber from Star Wars?
Pretty much.
Wow.
It's gone.
And are you sedated at that time?
No, I was awake.
And there's no painkillers that are
Oh, they inject you, but it's horrible.
Okay. So you
It put me in a high state of anxiety.
And did you have physical sensation though?
No.
Okay, but did you feel any pressure, or you felt nothing at all?
No, I felt my heart racing and incredible trauma, but not anything physical.
And where did they inject?
I don't remember.
The painkillers. I don't remember. Well, it's interesting because if it's not innervated and if it shouldn't cause any pain, then
they did inject that area.
Then why sedate?
I just don't remember specifically. Okay. Anyways, the point I wanted to make was not that. I don't care about the surgery details. What I care about is after. I was doing a lot of solo practice, so bringing blood flow, using the jade egg, for example, but in a conscious and proper way of using it. And then I don't remember when my next cervical exam was, but I had to go, for a checkup. And I had a new doctor. And so as the new doctor was doing the pelvic exam, I asked, well, how's the scarring and what's going on with the cervix? And they're like, what scarring? You have a perfect cervix. There wasn't even a line of regrowth. The cervix regrew itself beautifully, perfectly, with no scarring. I thought, this is crazy. I'd never heard of that before. And I couldn't find a lot of information on it until fairly recently when somebody else, MD friend of mine, said, oh no, the cervix has regenerative capacities. So I thought that was very interesting because there's no information on that. A lot of women have difficulties with this area. I think the reason mine regenerated so well was because I was literally doing practices, bringing in all that extra blood flow, which creates lymph circulation. So you're cleaning the area, bringing fresh oxygen and nutrients to the tissue, and the tissue was able to regenerate. So it's a pretty cool area of the body. I
mean, incredibly so. And one of the things that also gets overlooked is the kind of different emotions and psychology that goes with these areas of the body in terms of when they get stimulated in different ways. Now, you have a background in Taoism, and I know that they have very specific kind of teachings to the reflexology of the cervix. And I was wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit about what those emotions are and connected to it.
People, because of the pelvic nerve and how it signals to the brain, you will have an emotional response often to cervical stimulation. That's just the nature of that particular pathway. In the Taoist understanding of, they call it sexual reflexology, I call it the psychosexual map. The cervix is related to your heart, not in a physical sense. It's not part of your physical heart, but in an energetic sense. And what I find fascinating about that is when, again, the 5-element theory, if the heart is closed, let's say, you can feel shut down, right? A lot of people say, I feel shut down in my heart. You'll experience things like impatience, hastiness, or apathy. These 3 emotions I see a lot when women are dealing with frustrations or in the sexual realm. The hastiness is they just want to, come on, let's just get this over with. Impatience, oh gosh, why can't I ever generate pleasure? This is annoying me. Or apathy, I've completely given up. I don't care. Who cares?
Just use me. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's usually a signal on the psychosexual level that there's some work to be done around respecting oneself, connecting in with a sense of natural joy and enthusiasm. So there is a relationship there. And then the last thing I'll say before we switch to the explicit part of the podcast is I noticed that if women get their cervix hit during the act of sex and that hit hurts, inevitably within a 24-hour spectrum, they will tend to be shut down and get impatient or annoyed with their partner or feel apathetic towards their partner. And I've had that also happen to me. And when I noticed that, I would do the work to soften back open and create connection again. So it's really intriguing. This is not based, of course, on Western medicine, but I do find these theories very fascinating and give us an opportunity to really understand how we're interconnected emotionally, psychically, physically, sexually, and the importance of that, whether or not it's in a textbook, it's the lived experience of many women. And when you can feel the power of recognizing, oh, I'm shut down, now I know what to do to open up again, and you do that at will, you've attained a level of mastery in the realm of pleasure or sexuality, in other words. But we didn't even talk about psychedelics. Let's do that in the explicit side.
Well, on the explicit side as well, I'll tell a story of my own experience working with hundreds of women, and the things that I noticed and how it was quite interesting then coming later into contact with the Taoistic teachings and going, oh, that actually is explaining a lot of what I've already been seeing. To join us for the complete and explicit version of the podcast, simply upgrade your membership and gain instant access.